I told myself that I wasn't going to talk about my divorce online because I wanted to respect people's privacy. But I feel like I'm going insane.
I decided to get divorced for my second time at age 30. I went kicking and screaming. Actually, I went over to my girlfriend's house to complain for the 100th time about the things my husband was doing that I didn't like. And she so boldly said to me, "Maybe it's you."
The more I think about it, the more I realize I didn't like my wedding. And when I get married again, I'm eloping. Anywho, we get married. He said he has a call on his life to be a pastor. I believe it. Originally, he was working in...
This woman is confused. Don't jump into something you're not fully ready for, especially a wedding. This is why I say getting married young is a terrible thing, especially now in today's time. You may think that person is on the same page as you, but there's still something they're searching for out there. Some fantasy adventure they'll never find.
I told myself that I wasn't going to talk about my divorce online because I wanted to respect people's privacy. But I feel like I'm going insane. I have been separated from my soon-to-be ex-wife for less than a month. And it is just obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And I appreciate all the love and support that I am getting from my friends, from my family, from people who barely know me, from my lawyers. Like, I'm grateful. But what I think people don't realize is, like, if you are not in the divorce, so like all my friends and my family, whatever, like their lives continue. And I'm over here drowning, struggling to breathe, crying all the time, feeling so angry, feeling like this 24/7. And my life has to continue too. And I'm getting up in the morning and I'm doing the best I can because that's life. I'm a 30-year-old, like I'm an adult. I have a big girl job. That's just how it works. But I feel like I am screaming. And I'm like back here screaming and everybody else has continued walking forward and they can't hear me anymore. And it's not their fault. The anger that I feel right now is not their fault. I just want this to be done. I want this to be over because I feel like I'm losing my mind. And each day there's a new thing that I have to deal with. And getting divorced from a person who has become a version of themselves that I do not like, that I do not recognize, is so heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because I'm married to this person for a reason. I love this person. When me and this person got married, we discussed if we were ever going to get divorced, we were going to do it in the most amicable way possible. And I tried. I tried my very best. And maybe she is also trying her best. But her best isn't good enough. And maybe my best isn't good enough for her, but I need my therapist. Or a punching bag.
That new thing you have to deal with is called taking responsibility. Every adult, divorced or not, have things they have to deal with. The most important thing is to not let those things consume you and learn to get past them. Divorce can be hell or heaven for some people. I'll let you think about what that means.
I decided to get divorced for my second time at age 30. I went kicking and screaming. Actually, I went over to my girlfriend's house to complain for the 100th time about the things my husband was doing that I didn't like. And she so boldly said to me, maybe it's you. And I was like, excuse me? I'm sure that it's him.
I really wonder why your friend said that to you. Maybe she knows the real you that your husband had to deal with for years. No one is just gonna blurt that out without knowing something. Especially a friend that you go to every time you have issues with your husband, instead of talking to him about it. But of course she denied it and blamed it on the husband. These women are never in the wrong.
But she got into my head and I thought, well, maybe I should go to a therapist. And the therapist can say that it's him. So we went to this man, Louis Quimby. Louis Quimby was 73. He had been in practice for over 30 years. And when I tell you he was scary, I mean he was fucking terrifying. In this session, we got to the root of a few things. One, my husband at the time, zero interest in changing. Me, totally codependent and only willing to change if he was. Except then Louis got in my head. At the end of the session, he invites us to his group therapy session. And my husband immediately says no. He looks at me and says, well, you can come. You can go alone. On the drive home from that therapy session, when I tell you everything was blurry as fuck, I was crying, my head was on the window, I was in such victim mode. Like, who is going to save me from this? Somehow, some way, within a few days, I decided that I was going to go to group therapy alone. And that is what I did. For 6 months, every Wednesday at 5:30, I went to group therapy with Louis Quimby and 6 other people where he drilled into me things like, you need to make agreements in your relationships. Here are the 5 categories: sex, power, money, words, and feelings. If you do not have agreements in those places, you are going with the person who has the strongest opinion. You need to understand how you got your needs met. When he asked me the question, how did you learn to get your needs met? It took me 2 months to answer. When he asked me the question, what are your requirements in a relationship? It took me 3 months to answer. But within 6 months, I firmly decided I will be getting a divorce. 4 years I was single after that, practicing my requirements while dating, to the point where I would have them in the door and out the door within a week. It made me so strong and so ready to actually have a marriage. Now I've been married for 10 years. I'm obsessed with him, and I'm...
Weirdly enough, this therapist of yours invited you to a session alone, and somehow a few months later, you decided to divorce your husband. From what I'm understanding, this woman wanted her husband to change. But what was wrong with the husband that she wanted him to change so badly? Why didn't she have a heartfelt conversation with him one-on-one? It honestly sounds like she wanted some type of control over him. Her friend was right. She was the problem. She basically used this man as a test subject to build herself up for the next marriage, because she said,
it made me so strong and so ready to actually have a marriage.
Meaning she didn't consider the marriage she was in an actual marriage.
Why I divorced my ex-husband. Just to give you some backstory, I met this man when I was in undergrad. I was working at the apartment complex that he lived in. He was very persistent, wasn't really my type. I wasn't feeling him. He tried talking to me for a whole damn near year before we went out on our first date. But you know what? I said, you know what? I'm in a place in my life. I'm getting ready to graduate pretty soon. Maybe this is what I need, right? We get married, we do the whole thing. He's come to find out he's a PK. We found out we went to the same church, all of the things. So, you know, if you guys are deeply involved in church, I think sometimes the pressure to get married is pressuring. You know what I'm saying? As me being a baby Christian, I like to say, because I was really like in tune after I got saved, you know, right after I graduated or right before I graduated college. I'm like, let me get my life together. This is what I need that'll help me propel my adulthood. We date for a little over a year, barely. We date, get engaged, all in the same year. And then we got married like 6 months later. Had a big wedding, like 600 people showed up at my wedding. 400 people were at the reception. But, you know, we were young back then, so it wasn't real fancy like all the weddings is now. I was like 23, 24 when I got married, so it wasn't what y'all thinking. It was kind of, you know, what we can do for the low. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I realize I didn't like my wedding. And when I get married again, I'm eloping. Anywho, We get married. He said he has a call on his life to be a pastor. I believe it. Originally, he was working in pharmaceuticals, so he said he was originally going to go to school for to be a pharmacist, but God called him to be a pastor. Where you go, I go, right? And so he felt that he was called to move to Oklahoma to go to seminary school. So what did I do? I followed him to seminary school. He goes to seminary school, graduated, moved back to North Carolina. He has a pastoral role. We're doing all the things. At this point, we have my nephew. I get pregnant. It's like, all right, we really about to do this. Y'all know me. If y'all watch any of my previous stories times, y'all know I didn't grow up like this. My mom wasn't married growing up, so this was really important to me. I'm starting my family. After being in North Carolina for a couple years, he gets offered a position in Oklahoma, so we moved back to Oklahoma. Not even 90 days later, shit hits the fan. I literally find out my husband is living a double life. Watch for part 2.
Being married young sounds cool and all, but I wouldn't advise it to anyone. Maybe a few people might be able to do it based on how they were raised and what kind of parents they had in their lives. This woman continued the marriage knowing damn well she didn't like it, and they only got married after 6 months of knowing each other. It sounds like to me this wedding was rushed, and the husband was wrong for living a double life, and this should have waited until she knew who she was really marrying. Take your time, people. Subscribe.